I'm currently in my studio, witnessing an unexpected situation unfold on a grand scale. Just 12 days ago, the United States and Israel initiated a military campaign against Iran, branding it a short-term operation, a swift excursion, as described by the commander-in-chief. They portrayed it as a surgical and controlled strike that would conclude before the world had time to react. That narrative is no longer viable. What is actually happening right now is the most significant energy crisis since 1973. The Strait of Hormuz, the crucial 21-mile-wide choke point through which 20% of the world's oil supply passes daily, is not just threatened, it is entirely closed. Ships are ablaze, crew members are unaccounted for, and oil prices have surged past $100 a barrel. The International Energy Agency has authorized the largest emergency reserve release in its history, and the FBI has warned law enforcement across California that Iran might be preparing to launch drone strikes on American soil from an unidentified vessel off the Pacific coast. Let that sink in. This is not about a Gulf state, a base in the Middle East, or an ally in the region. It pertains to American soil, specifically California. We have 12 days of war behind us, yet no one in Washington has provided the American public with clear answers to several pressing questions. What is the exit strategy? What does victory look like? When will this conflict end? And who is accountable for what has already become one of the most costly and destabilizing military operations the U.S. has undertaken in a generation? I will address all of these questions right now, providing facts, numbers, names, and a timeline that the press conferences are deliberately obscuring. If you're tuning into Sarah Mitchell's YouTube channel for the first time, subscribe now and hit the notification bell. This story is evolving rapidly, and you cannot afford to fall behind. Let's rewind to the beginning. On February 25th, 2026, just 3 days before the bombs began to fall, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araqi publicly announced that a historic agreement with the United States to prevent military conflict was within reach. He shared this on social media, emphasizing the word historic. The discussions were taking place in Geneva, and Oman's foreign minister, Bad al-Bizadai, went even further, stating that a breakthrough had been achieved. Iran, he claimed, had agreed to never stockpile enriched uranium to allow full verification by the International Atomic Energy Agency and to irreversibly downgrade its current enriched uranium to the lowest possible level. Peace, al-Bizadai asserted, was within reach. On February 27th, the day before the bombs dropped, Oman continued to express optimism about a potential deal. However, on February 28th, just before dawn, the United States and Israel launched Operation Epic Fury, a coordinated wave of airstrikes targeting Iranian missile sites, nuclear facilities, command infrastructure, and the nation's senior leadership. Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei was killed in the initial hours, with his compound in Tehran obliterated. The state broadcaster IRIB was struck in a separate Israeli operation on March 3rd, and the IRGC's Malik Ashta building in central Tehran was completely destroyed, as confirmed by video footage reviewed by Iran International. Then came the crucial question that no one in the White House seemed to have a real answer for: what would Iran do next? Contrary to expectations, Iran did not capitulate. It did not fracture into civil war. Instead, within hours, Iran launched massive retaliatory missile and drone barrages at Israeli cities and U.S. military bases in the UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, and Bahrain. The Crown Plaza Hotel in Manama, Bahrain, was struck, indicating that civilian and commercial environments were no longer off limits. The U.S. Embassy in Kuwait was also hit by a missile, prompting Secretary of State Marco Rubio to order its closure until further notice. Italian and French military installations in the region were caught in the crossfire, suffering damage from Iranian ordnance. A NATO air defense system in the eastern Mediterranean successfully intercepted a ballistic missile fired from Iran that was heading toward Turkish territory, with debris landing on Turkish soil. By March 7th, the Iranian Red Crescent reported that 742 civilians had been killed inside Iran and 6,668 civilian units, including homes, schools, and critical infrastructure, had been targeted. A U.S. military investigation concluded this week that American forces had struck a school in the city of Manab in southern Iran. When the commander-in-chief was directly asked at a press conference, as commander-in-chief, "Do you take responsibility for the strike on the school?" his response was simply, "I don't know." Just 4 words. Now, let me present the 3 announcements that clarify our current standing 12 days into this conflict, as the press conferences have not conveyed these details. Announcement number 1. The Strait of Hormuz is not merely disrupted, it is a war zone, and the economic damage is compounding more rapidly than anyone in Washington is willing to acknowledge. On March 2nd, a senior IRGC official confirmed on camera that the strait was closed, stating that any vessel attempting to pass would be set ablaze. He meant it. Within 24 hours, tracking data from CLR revealed that no commercial tankers in the strait were broadcasting automatic identification system signals. The only vessels still transiting were Iranian-flagged and Chinese-flagged. For everyone else, the world's most vital energy corridor had ceased to function. The statistics are staggering. The strait handles approximately 20 million barrels of oil every single day, accounting for 20% of the world's daily oil supply. It also facilitates 22% of global LNG trade. 1/3 of the world's fertilizer moves through this waterway, and 30% of Europe's jet fuel either originates in the Gulf or transits the strait. Moreover, 84% of the crude oil that flows through it is destined for China, India, Japan, and South Korea. These are not mere abstractions. They represent the supply arteries of the global economy, and they are currently severed. By March 8th, the UK Maritime Trade Operations Centre had recorded 10 attacks on ships, resulting in 5 crew members killed on 2 vessels and at least 5 tankers damaged. Approximately 150 ships were anchored outside the strait, unable to move. According to analysis from Middle East Briefing, as of March 1st, 170 container ships with a combined capacity of 450,000 TEU, roughly 1.4% of the entire global container fleet, were trapped inside the strait and unable to exit in any direction. The insurance market signaled impending trouble even before headlines broke. In the days leading up to Operation Epic Fury, more risk insurance premiums for transit through the strait jumped from 0.125% to between 0.2% and 0.4% of a ship's insured value per transit. For a very large crude carrier, this translates to a $250,000 increase for a single voyage. By March 5th, according to the 2026 Strait of Hormuz crisis tracking, protection and indemnity insurance had been entirely withdrawn, as the economic risk was deemed too high for underwriters to cover. When insurance withdraws, shipping halts not due to missiles, but due to mathematics. Brent crude was around $70 a barrel before the strikes. It surged by 10% to 13% to $80 to $82 by March 2nd, jumped another 15% to around $83 by March 5th, and ultimately crossed $100 in the days that followed. Qatar, which supplies roughly 20% of the world's LNG and through which Europe receives 12% to 14% of its LNG directly, halted all gas production on March 2nd and declared force majeure on all gas contracts on March 4th. Qatar's energy minister, Saad Al-Kaabi, publicly warned that if the war continues, other Gulf producers may be forced to halt exports as well, which would devastate global economies. European natural gas prices nearly doubled following Qatar's announcement. In response, the IA authorized an emergency release of 400 million barrels of oil from global reserves, the largest emergency release in the agency's entire history. Oil prices surged more than 9% regardless. Announcement number 2, the United States is not protecting the Strait of Hormuz, and those delivering press conferences are fully aware of this fact. Hold 2 conflicting thoughts in your mind simultaneously. On one hand, the administration has been assuring the American public and corporate leaders that the Navy is present, that shipping lanes are secured, and that it is safe to send vessels through. At a recent press conference, the commander-in-chief was directly asked, "Are you encouraging oil company CEOs to use the strait?" His response was, "I think they should." I think they should use them. On the other hand, the War Zone reports that the U.S. Navy has been systematically refusing near-daily requests from the oil and shipping industries for military escorts through the Strait since the very first day of Operation Epic Fury. Near-daily requests have been denied. The Navy is saying no while the White House is saying yes. Meanwhile, the RGC's naval commander has been posting on Telegram, naming specific ships that trusted those assurances and entered the Strait anyway, detailing their fates. The Mayuri Nari, a Thai bulk carrier, was struck by 2 projectiles on March 11th while traveling toward India from the UAE, with its engine room destroyed and a fire ignited. 3 crew members remain missing, believed to be trapped below decks. According to the Thai Navy, the Express Rhone, a Liberia-flagged container ship, was also struck. Iran publicly named both vessels in a statement directed at the global shipping industry, sending a clear message: you were warned. General Dan Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, provided an updated framing of the war's objectives this week, stating that the goals are to destroy Iran's missile and drone capabilities, degrade Iran's navy, and prevent Tehran from threatening the United States and its allies for years to come. Notice what was conspicuously absent from that list. Iran's nuclear program was not mentioned even once. This is significant, especially as satellite imagery confirmed ongoing strikes at the Parchin nuclear complex. The publicly stated mission has shifted, but no formal announcement of this change has been made. What we do know is that U.S. forces have confirmed the elimination of 16 Iranian mine-laying vessels, while the White House reported a total of 60 Iranian ships destroyed. The USS Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group is moving south through the Red Sea toward the combat theater, and the USS Frank E. Peterson Jr. destroyer launched Tomahawk cruise missiles at Iranian targets on March 10th. On day 11, the U.S. military promised what it termed the most intense day of strikes throughout the entire operation. This is not a campaign winding down, it is escalating. And by March 10th, Iran had already begun laying naval mines in the Strait, according to military intelligence sources cited by NBC News. The sequence is crucial. The U.S. destroys Iranian mine-laying vessels, and Iran continues to mine the Strait. The Strait remains closed, and the war adapts and continues. Announcement number 3. The war has now extended beyond the Middle East. The Diplomat published a direct analysis this week under the headline, Operation Epic Fury Moves East. The Iran conflict has left the Middle East. Read that carefully. On March 4th, a U.S. military submarine sank the Iris Dana, Iran's most modern Mauj-class frigate, approximately 40 nautical miles off the southern coast of Sri Lanka in the Indian Ocean. The ship had 180 crew members aboard and sent a distress call before sinking. This is no longer a Gulf engagement. It is not limited to the Strait of Hormuz. It is occurring in the Indian Ocean, a critical waterway connecting the Persian Gulf to the Pacific and Atlantic trading lanes. Iranian long-range naval assets were operating there, and the U.S. targeted them. Furthermore, Iranian drone strikes have targeted energy infrastructure in Azerbaijan, placing that country's military on high alert and raising the possibility of the conflict expanding northward. A ballistic missile fired from Iran was intercepted by NATO air defenses in the eastern Mediterranean after it was tracked traveling through Iraqi and Syrian airspace toward Turkey, with debris landing in Turkey's Hatay province. An Iranian drone struck a British military base on Cyprus, while installations belonging to Italy and France in the region also sustained damage. Then came the FBI warning regarding California, an unidentified vessel, and potential drone strikes. According to ABC News, the alert indicates that Iran is considering using unmanned aerial vehicles to strike unspecified targets on the U.S. West Coast. California Governor Gavin Newsom acknowledged the warning during a press conference, labeling it unverified and noting that there was no imminent threat. However, the mere existence of the warning is significant in itself. This situation is rapidly evolving, and the implications are profound. Stay tuned as we continue to monitor this developing story. The fact that federal law enforcement is briefing state police departments about potential Iranian drone attacks on American soil highlights just how far this conflict has escalated in just 12 days. Now, let's discuss the strategy, or more accurately, the lack of one. Iran's new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, was elected on March 8th, just 9 days after his father was killed in the initial strikes of Operation Epic Fury. At 56 years old, he has managed to stabilize the regime faster than almost any outside analyst predicted. Allegiances have been pledged from the IRGC, prominent political figures like Ali Larijani and President Peshkian, and religious scholars across the country. Iranian state media reported public rallies in over 150 cities. Analysis from the International Counterterrorism Institute concluded that this transition demonstrated the regime's continuity and resilience. What was intended to be a decapitation strike aimed at ending the regime has instead resulted in a new leader who has vowed to continue the fight. Iran has officially declared a shift in its military doctrine, moving from reciprocal strikes to continuous strikes. The IRGC declared that it would not permit even a single liter of oil to reach the United States, Israel, or their partners, labeling any vessel bound for those destinations as a legitimate target. They issued a chilling figure that is haunting energy markets worldwide: $200 per barrel. This number makes sense when you consider the underlying economics. Before the war began, Iran front-loaded its oil exports, with producers loading crude at multi-year highs in February in anticipation of the strikes. Iran now controls who passes through the Strait of Hormuz and who does not. Chinese and Iranian ships can pass freely, while everyone else is left waiting. Iran is essentially controlling the energy supply, deciding who gets access. Meanwhile, the proxy network is becoming increasingly active around the edges of the conflict. Hezbollah launched 100 rockets at northern Israel in a single barrage this week, prompting the IDF to respond with warning strikes on Beirut's southern suburbs and to announce operations south of the Litani River. The Houthis in Yemen have their leader, Abdul Malik al-Houthi, stating in a recorded address that his group is ready to act whenever necessary. The Red Sea bypass, which the global logistics industry relied on during the last Houthi crisis, is now being monitored as a potential choke point. The issue of drone warfare is a significant challenge that Pentagon officials struggle to address. Iran's Shahid drones cost approximately $20,000 each, while the interceptors designed to destroy them cost tens of millions per launch. This math is unsustainable over a prolonged campaign. Tens of thousands of these drones were deployed in Ukraine over multiple years, and the U.S. observed that conflict unfold from the beginning. There was even a reported offer from the Ukrainian government to share expertise on how to detect, jam, and defend against these drones effectively and affordably, but that offer was reportedly declined. As of March 11th, the percentage of Iranian drones successfully penetrating UAE and Israeli air defenses had risen to between 20% and 25%, significantly higher than the penetration rate seen in the early days of the conflict. The UAE Defense Ministry confirmed that on March 10th alone, it intercepted 8 missiles and 26 drones, while a 9th missile fell into the sea. 9 more drones landed on Emirati territory, with the Ruwais industrial complex, the region's largest refinery, being struck and forced to shut down. Oman's port of Salalah, the main alternative shipping hub for tankers trying to avoid the strait, was also hit by Iranian drones, resulting in fuel storage tanks being set ablaze. Maris has halted all operations at Salalah until further notice, effectively closing off the bypass route at the same time as the primary route. Now, let's discuss the implications of all this for the average American family. This conflict is not occurring thousands of miles away. It is already impacting your daily life, affecting your kitchen, your gas tank, and your grocery bills. According to the Center for American Progress, in the first week following the start of Operation Epic Fury, the average price of gasoline in the U.S. rose by 48 cents per gallon. Diesel prices have reached $4.81 per gallon, the highest since December 2022. In the Chicago area, gas prices increased between 50 and 90 cents in just 1 week. The consumer price index was at 2.4% in January, showing progress in controlling inflation, but that progress is now being erased in real time. However, the oil and gas price increases are not even the most pressing concern for analysts right now. One-third of the global fertilizer trade transits through the Strait of Hormuz. The price of urea at the New Orleans fertilizer hub skyrocketed from $475 per metric ton to $680 per metric ton since the war began, a staggering 43% price spike in less than 2 weeks. This timing is critical as the disruption coincides with the onset of the spring planting season for corn and soybeans across the Midwest. Fuel costs account for 40% to 50% of variable crop production expenses. If fertilizer prices remain high during the planting window, the consequences for food prices in American grocery stores will be significant in the second half of 2026, far beyond what we are experiencing with gas prices today. This is not a hypothetical risk. The supply chain shock is already underway, and the planting window opens in just weeks. Beyond fertilizer, 85% of polyethylene exports from the Middle East transit through the Strait. Polyethylene is essential for packaging, automotive components, and most consumer goods, including chemicals, plastics, pharmaceuticals, and aluminum. According to logistics analysts cited by CNBC, when diverted ships arrive at alternative ports, terminal congestion intensifies within 2 to 5 weeks. The demand for drayage outstrips the available trucks, creating a ripple effect throughout the North American supply chain. Major global shipping companies, including Maersk and Hapag-Lloyd, have already suspended Middle Eastern routes entirely. In the first 10 days of this conflict, 7 American service members have been killed and 140 wounded. According to Pentagon confirmations, thousands of American tourists remain stranded across the Middle East, stuck in airports and hotels in countries where runways have been struck by Iranian missiles, unable to return home. Americans abroad have reached out to the State Department for emergency assistance after the U.S. Embassy in Kuwait was forced to close. If this analysis resonates with you, it's time to cut through the noise and highlight what isn't being discussed in the press conferences. This is the moment to like this video and subscribe to Sarah Mitchell's YouTube channel. Leave a comment below with your honest assessment of the planning that went into this operation. I read every single one. We face 2 paths ahead, with no comfortable middle ground or soft landing between them. The first path involves an off-ramp materializing before the global economy fractures. For this to happen, Mojtaba Khamenei, just 9 days into his leadership and inheriting a war and a country under sustained bombardment, would need to find a version of de-escalation he could present publicly as a political victory rather than a surrender. The ingredients for this scenario exist theoretically. Iran has demonstrated its ability to impose a catastrophic global economic shock, proven that its drones can penetrate advanced air defenses at meaningful rates, and shown that its network extends from Azerbaijan to Sri Lanka to California. A negotiated pause could be established in which Iran declares it has extracted its price, secured some form of commitment regarding nuclear rights or sanctions relief, and the strait is reopened under international maritime monitoring. Saudi Arabia, which has been quietly rerouting its trade to Red Sea ports, and which absolutely does not want oil prices at $200 per barrel, as this would ultimately destroy global demand for its product, could serve as a back channel. Qatar desperately needs to restart gas production, and the E3, Britain, France, and Germany, have indicated a willingness to engage in defensive maritime operations. That diplomatic framework exists, but threading the needle requires the U.S. to offer something Iran can publicly label as a concession without the administration losing face domestically. This is an extraordinarily complex political challenge to address simultaneously on both sides. The second path leads to a downward spiral. Iran could continue its continuous strikes indefinitely, with the Houthis fully activating in the Red Sea. Both the Strait of Hormuz and the Red Sea could be simultaneously compromised for commercial shipping. Qatar's LNG could remain offline into April, causing European natural gas prices to double again as we head into a late winter cold snap. Oil could rise to $150 per barrel due to sustained supply disruptions, while fertilizer prices stay elevated through the spring planting window, leading to food inflation numbers not seen in the US since the 1970s. Companies may permanently restructure their supply chains away from Gulf dependency, a process that takes years to complete, and the jobs tied to those supply chains may not return even after a ceasefire is eventually signed. The International Crisis Group has explicitly warned that a closure of the strait would cause oil prices to spike violently due to fear alone, pushing fragile economies closer to recession in a matter of weeks. While the IA's emergency release buys time, it does not provide unlimited time. Analysts project that at sustained disruption rates, emergency reserves could begin to be materially depleted within roughly 6 months. A second supply crisis, compounding the first, would create conditions that no one has adequately modeled. On the military front, the nuclear program cited as the primary justification for the strikes remains operational, according to congressional sources with access to classified assessments. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz declared this week that the war will continue indefinitely, without any set timeline. The Joint Chiefs of Staff provided Congress with a list of 3 war objectives, yet did not include the nuclear program on that list. There is no public exit strategy, no public timeline, and no shared definition between the US and Israel regarding what constitutes a successful conclusion. That brings us to day 12 of Operation Epic Fury. I keep thinking about 3 people, the 3 crew members of the Mayuri Nari, a Thai bulk carrier, who remain missing tonight. They were simply doing their job, transporting cargo from the UAE to India. They heard the assurances coming from the highest levels of the US government that it was safe to traverse the Strait of Hormuz. On March 11, 2026, 2 projectiles struck their ship, igniting a fire in the engine room. As I record this, they are still unaccounted for, likely trapped below decks in a burning ship in the most perilous stretch of ocean on the planet. All because a government assured the world's CEOs that it was fine to send their ships through during Operation Epic Fury. In just 12 days, 7 Americans have been killed, 140 wounded, 5 foreign crew members have died, and 3 remain missing. Over 700 Iranian civilians have lost their lives. Gas prices are at their highest in 3 years. Fertilizer costs have risen by 43% just before the planting season, and 150 ships are anchored, unable to move. The world's most critical energy corridor is closed to all but Chinese and Iranian traffic. We are witnessing the largest emergency oil release in IA history, an FBI bulletin warning of drone strikes on California, a nuclear program that remains intact, a new Iranian supreme leader who has pledged to continue the fight, and a commander-in-chief who, when asked about taking responsibility for a military strike that killed children, responded with, "I don't know." I have 3 questions for you, and I need your answers in the comments right now. Was Operation Epic Fury launched with a genuine exit strategy, or was it initiated under the assumption that Iran would simply collapse, leaving no plan B when that did not happen? If the strait remains closed through April and the fertilizer shortage coincides with the corn and soybean planting window, what will the food inflation situation look like in America by autumn? And which communities will be hit hardest? And finally, if Iran is already warning California and there exists a federal law enforcement bulletin about potential drone strikes on American soil, what could further escalation entail? Where does this situation ultimately lead? Please leave your answers below. Subscribe to Sarah Mitchell's YouTube channel. This story is far from over, and we will be tracking every development. Share this video with anyone still only receiving the press conference narrative. The gap between what is being said publicly and what is actually happening on the ground in the strait and in your economy has never been wider. You deserve the full picture, and that is what we are here to provide.